Hey, it's January 11th, 2022. Welcome to Triggered. I'm Cory Morgan. This show is going to be coming to you daily every morning at 11:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, or at least Monday to Friday. We're going to be covering the issues the mainstream media won't and talking about the things they don't. I mean, that's the great thing about the Western Standard. This is a new way for us to discuss the stories we're covering, get some great guests on, and have some interaction and again, talking about things that the others won't. Comments are welcome. This is part of the thing about being live. I like them. I won't necessarily respond to every one of them, but I do try to bring them in. I can put them forward to the guests when I can. We just, of course, want to keep it civil. You can discuss with each other in the comments scroll as well. We are on Rumble, and it's a popular spot. We're still working out the tech issues so I can see the Rumble comments. So I'm not ignoring it if you're commenting on Rumble. I just can't see them yet, and I will look at them later for what that's worth. I just won't catch them right on the show. Today's guests are going to be Ernie Tsu of the Alberta Hospitality Association. He's going to talk about, of course, the challenges for restaurants, bars, everything that's been going on with the pandemic restrictions, supply chain issues. I mean, all of this together. They're just having a terribly hard time, and Ernie's going to be able to expand on that and hopefully point out some things we can do to ease those problems. Then I'm going to have a community advocate, Jacob McGregor, come on. Jacob ran in Ward 1 in the last election. He's a young man, and he wrote a column for us recently on universal basic income, and he doesn't want it. He's a young man with ambition who's saying, hey, you know, this might be well-intentioned, but it's not where we need to go. It's not what I want as a young man. I do need some help as I go forward in life, but not that way. So it'll be a great chat with both of them. Now, before I get to my rant, I'll get to a rant, and I'm going to check in with the newsroom after that. We're going to talk about our sponsor, Bitcoin Well. These guys are at bitcoinwell.com, and they're the fastest and safest way for you to buy Bitcoin. I mean, you want to be safe. People are concerned about cryptocurrencies. I mean, you got to make sure you're going to an established company dealing with this. And these guys send your Bitcoin directly to you. So it's not held. It's in your wallet. It's non-custodial. That's what it means. It's your money. These are things we like to clarify with this sponsor because the cryptocurrencies are new and people are wondering what it's about. They're a little hesitant. Bitcoin Well, they're reputable. They're the first publicly traded Bitcoin ATM company. They got over 200 ATMs in Western Canada. You can go pull money out. Set it and forget it. They have a savings plan. That's where you can have your Bitcoin sitting in there in your account and just not worry about it. And you can set up monthly or bi-weekly payments directly to your wallet. You can also set up your payments going out. It's just like any bank account. This is the way to get into cryptocurrencies, get away from the central banks, away from government control, pay your bills with Bitcoin, buy it with Visa debit. Check them out. Go to bitcoinwell.com where you can make transactions quickly and safely while still being in control of your own Bitcoin. So the show's name is Triggered. I trigger other people all the time. That's nothing new. I get triggered all the time, and that's what I go on about. So what's got me triggered today? Alberta's ICU beds. I mean, as the Omicron case numbers are mounting, so are the panicked calls for lockdowns. Well, the symptoms of Omicron appear to be little more than those of the common cold. The sheer volume of cases has people concerned due to the pathetically low hospital capacities we have here in Alberta. Currently, there's 72 people in Alberta ICUs due to COVID-19. There's 635 in hospital with COVID, not necessarily due to it. And despite evidence indicating that typically half of the hospitalizations in Canada being attributed to COVID aren't actually due to COVID infections. Health officials seem to appear reticent to correct those numbers for some reason. Even Ontario's chief medical officer, he admitted that it's likely near 60% of the admissions that have been listed as COVID-related aren't actually COVID-related. He vowed to correct the record, but that was weeks ago, and so far there's been no corrections. In Alberta, Dr. Dina Hinshaw has been questioned on this, and she admitted they don't really know who's been admitted because of COVID or people who just happen to test positive with it after having been admitted. Why is this so hard to determine? Anybody who's been admitted into a hospital emergency room knows damn well they take meticulous records. I mean, what's that bored-looking duty nurse behind that glass window actually typing as she monotonously asks questions while you bleed out, answering them in hopes of being admitted for the roofing nail protruding from your forehead? I mean, assuming you don't need immediate emergency treatment upon admission to a hospital, the first thing they're going to do is test you for COVID. If indeed you test positive, you're going to be added to the list of people hospitalized with COVID, despite that roofing nail being what you actually were inspired to come in with in the first place. Now, this terribly skews the numbers. And it's becoming clear that tens of thousands of us are walking around with the Omicron variant right now, and we don't even know it. That's how weak this variant thankfully is. I mean, people still are getting injured due to other reasons, however. And those COVID tests make it appear that there's a wave of hospitalizations due to the virus when there aren't. Still, even if it's only a tiny fraction of people who do need treatment for an infection with that variant, and Delta is still out there too, we do have to be concerned. And when we're talking about tens or even hundreds of thousands of new infections, this could put pressure on our health system. Okay, that's fair enough. So that brings us back to the ICU and hospital capacity issues again. We're nearly 2 years into this pandemic, and have we learned nothing? We keep talking about the pandemic becoming endemic, and that means we'll go back to living normally and just moving on and dealing with it, with the virus being among us, and we'll just have to cope with it. But in order to do so, we got to make sure our medical facilities are ready and able to withstand these waves of infection as they come and go. Now, right now, we have fewer than 100 people in ICU with a province of 4.3 million citizens, and apparently it's threatening to crush the system again. What the hell's happening out there? I mean, here's some comparisons, though. In the United States, there's roughly 1 bed per 4,100 people, 1 ICU bed. In Canada, there's 1 per 6,000. That's a huge difference, a very significant difference, and it makes a big difference in what we can handle and what we can't when it comes to such acute care. When it comes to regular hospital beds, Canada fares no better. There's a list which ranks all the developed nations. We're 36th with 2.5 hospital beds per 1,000 citizens. Number 1 is Japan with 13 beds per 1,000. I mean, look at the spread, the difference. Now, we need to stop looking at these panicked and clearly ineffectual lockdowns and restrictions and start asking frank questions about why our system sucks this badly. Our hospitals were sitting around 96% capacity even before we'd ever heard of COVID-19. It doesn't take a lot to bring a system like that to its knees. Now, the governments can be forgiven for not being able to change that during the first 6 months of the pandemic. They can't move on a dime. We didn't know what was happening. But we can't forgive them for doing nothing during the subsequent 18 months. I mean, we've been talking for 18 months in a pandemic, and apparently our capacity is as bad or possibly lower than it was when this thing started. What's going on? Why can't we change it? Why can't we get more beds? Why can't we get more capacity? Is it the rigid socialized system? Is it the unions in the way? Is it the way the infrastructure is and everything's centralized in hospitals? I don't know. We got to start that discussion. It sure as hell isn't for lack of money because we've been borrowing and spending like crazy. Now it's time to gore that sacred cow of Canada's failing healthcare system, and it's failing, and start examining it with a critical eye. I mean, clearly vaccinations alone aren't going to stop the spread. Well, it doesn't stop the spread. It reduces the symptoms of COVID-19. So we got to look at how we're going to treat people who are seriously impacted with it, and that means healthcare facilities. We're 2 years into this nightmare. Governments are still running around like decapitated chickens every time an infection starts to surge. There's no excuse for this. We need to set the goal of increasing hospital capacity and find a way to do it no matter how it might shatter some people's illusions with Canada's healthcare system. Otherwise, we're never going to return to normal living. Okay, so that's what's got me triggered today. Now, I'm going to check in with our news editor, Dave Naylor, and see what other news items are topping the list right now and what else is going to get me triggered for the afternoon. How you doing, Dave, and welcome back to Calgary.
I'm doing great, Cory. I'm not sure why I heard all this complaining about weather while I was gone. It's beautiful here.
Yes, you did have the magic timing to avoid the deep freeze and get here for the slush bowl. So it probably feels a lot like that West Coast weather you were enjoying before you got back here.
Yeah, my timing was perfect. I left just before the minus 30 hit and got back when minus 30 left. So couldn't have planned it any better.
Right on. So what has been sitting on your desk greeting you? What stories are topping the scroll in the newsroom today?
We've got a very emotional story at the top of our website right now, Cory, about a Saskatchewan father who has basically kidnapped his 7-year-old daughter because the ex-wife wants to give the daughter the COVID vaccine, and now he's been hiding. He's living on the run. So a really emotional story about what the lengths a father will go to try and keep his daughter from having the vaccine. So that's on the top of the website right now. It's been a really busy morning, Cory. You remember the story that broke around Christmas, where it was revealed that the government was tracking 33 million Canadian cell phones and using them to monitor their movements during the pandemic. Nobody was told about this, of course. Nobody knew a thing. So the opposition has banded together, and they've been able to get the whole situation going to the ethics committee. So we're going to hear some reasoning behind the Public Health Agency and what they were doing, snooping on 33 million of us. Also happening today in Quebec, the province's chief health czar has resigned after 12 years. He had a controversial reign during the COVID pandemic in Quebec. And as you know, Cory, they're locked down tighter than a drum out there. So it'll be interesting to see what Premier Legault says at his press conference this afternoon. What else is on our list? Banks, if you're fed up of paying service charges to banks, it looks like they're finally going to be starting to pay a bit more of their share in taxes. Banking industry representatives said, hey, it's no big deal. We're looking at maybe an extra $3 billion in taxes, and we earned $73 billion. So, just a drop in the bucket for banks. And Abbotsford, the first claim has been filed for a lawsuit against the city of Abbotsford and the province of BC for basically not giving people enough warning. Residents just across the border in Washington State, they got 2 days warning that this flood was coming. No such luck for the people in BC, so they filed a class action there. And the cute story, I guess, if you want to call it that, of the morning, Cory, is condom sales around the world have fallen flat. People are not having sex during the pandemic, apparently, and the world's largest manufacturer of condoms says their business is down 50%. So they're going to change from making condoms to making rubber gloves. So that's what's on the website this morning, Cory. Being a busy morning, and lots of stuff coming this afternoon. We'll keep an eye on Alberta COVID figures again. We had a record yesterday. I think it was 5,200. And we had a good chunk of change of more people in hospitals. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. And that's just goes to what you were talking about, Cory, with ICU levels. So another good day, another busy day here in the newsroom.
Great. Well, thanks for checking in with us, Dave. And for people, go to westernstandardonline.com to see the stories Dave was talking about that they've already been written, and they're going to be following up with, particularly that condom one. I'm wondering, though, is it a matter of people stopped having sex, or maybe they've just stopped using condoms? I mean, we might see a baby boom coming up here pretty soon. They've just given up. They're sick of masking, and they're sick of washing their hands and everything else. It's just one part of their body where the health administrators can't get into your bed and find out that you didn't actually cover. Maybe it's an act of rebellion.
It could be, but people have been staying home all over the world, right? People haven't been going out. They haven't been going to clubs. So I think it's probably more a case of that people are having less sex.
Well, and that is just sad all around. I mean, we're having a social consequence of this whole pandemic nightmare as it is. I mean, one of the most free and blessed activities we've had historically in humanity has been that. And for us to be giving it up is tragic indeed.
Exactly.
All right. Thanks, Dave. I'll talk to you a little later then.
Thanks, Cory.
Right on. So, yeah, that's what we've got happening in the newsroom today. And again, things as they break and such, as Dave said, there's going to be the Tuesday updates from the Alberta government and the medical officers. We got Chronicles cartoon there. That's a good one. He gives these cartoons to us now and then. Why not? Why can't we identify as vaccinated and say that's enough? And we can identify as everything else. And apparently that's enough to convince authorities on things sometimes. Vaccinated, why not? I see Carrie Ann. Carrie Ann. I'm going to leave that hyphenated name there. I'll give it a try. Gelsis Canes. I think the Canes part looks easy. Either way, Carrie Ann was asking, if we can get a link for the video montage from yesterday. All of the promises that the vaccination was going to end the pandemic. I'll see if I can find that later. Follow me on Twitter at CoryMorgan.com or at Cory B. Morgan, things like that. I'll tweet it out. It wasn't us who made it, but it's a great montage. And for those who didn't see it, it just listed through all of those public figures from Bill Gates to President Biden and others basically saying that, transmission will be ended through vaccination. And we've seen that isn't the case. And I mean, I'm not anti-vax by any means. We get enough fights with my commenters over that as it goes. I do believe vaccination is a good idea. I completely against forced vaccination, separate issue altogether. But we're stepping beyond that myth that it stops transmission. It doesn't. And I'm forcing those people to eat their words a little bit. They said it was going to stop transmission. They sold it based on that. Obviously, it's not the case. And I wish they would walk it back. But instead, they're almost pretending that they never said that. No, they said it. And we're going to remind them of it. Should be coming up. Jamie Buchan says the condom market is softening. Yeah, these condom stories always leave so much room to make jokes about. I mean, there could be an underlying serious issue, but there's also a lot of things we can laugh at. God, we need a few laughs these days, don't we? Everything's been too bloody serious. I mean, I rant and rave all the time, but for those familiar with me, I like my dark humor as well. So I'm going to go quickly. Ernie's coming up in 4 or 5 minutes, and I'm going to cover our sponsor, another one of them anyways. And one of the nice things with us being independent media, I mean, we rely on you guys taking out memberships at westernstandardonline.com, subscribing. And also we have advertisers, and they reflect kind of our following and viewers. So the Canada Shooting Sports Association, these guys have been a sponsor of ours. I mean, their name kind of says it all. They're an association of people who participate in shooting sports. And their website is cssa-cila.org. A bit of a mouthful, but if you Google Canada Shooting Sports Association, you'll find them. And they've got legal challenges out right now on behalf of firearms owners. They're standing up for you because you're having your property rights taken away. You are getting infringed upon. The Liberal government wants to take away your ability to responsibly and safely enjoy firearms. They're slowly but surely, getting them out of your hands, and we need to push back. So these guys are doing so. Plus, they've got a lot of other resources just on good shooting sports, proper practices, like any other association of hobbyists or people who get together on something. And they're protecting your right to collect or own or hunt or use firearms. So check them out. The Canada Shooting Sports Association, and take out a membership with them. They're helping you so you can keep possessing and owning your firearms as you should be allowed. What's this to the Albertan? That's what's called a teaser story when it comes to the condom thing. Yes. I don't know if it's that much of a tease, but I mean, yeah, what a bizarre world, and things we've got going on. And one of the things I'll be talking with Ernie Tsu when we get him on here is how supply chains have been impacting things and affecting things. I mean, we've got all sorts of consumer products, food items, and things that are getting hard to find all of a sudden, and they're unpredictable. We don't know what's going to show up one week or another. We have a story, Dave didn't touch upon that with the newsroom check-in, actually, about we've got thousands of truckers now who have chosen not to get vaccinated, and the hammer is coming down. Like, this is in North America. They won't be able to cross the border into Canada. That deadline's coming up. I had to remember the story. I believe it's within just a few days. And now these truckers won't be able to get into Canada. Now, with our already difficult supply chain issues, with our difficulty and costs for food items, particularly things that get trucked up from the south, I mean, we're not getting that romaine grown locally when we have our Caesar salad in January. We now take thousands of truckers out of the mix and their ability to bring it up. I'm afraid we're probably going to be in for yet even more shortages of some items and cost hikes. It's just a dire outlook all around. But that ties in a bit with I'm going to talk to some items with Ernie Tsu about, because he's in the hospitality sector and he knows as well as I do from when I used to own a pub. It's a narrow margin business, and then when your inputs go up, boy, it makes it a heck of a lot harder to get by, especially if you got insecure supply. So let's bring Ernie in and see what's going on out there. Hey, Ernie, how you doing?
How are you, Cory?
Good. So yeah, you're the president, just to make sure I've introduced you earlier too, you're the president of the Alberta Hospitality Association, and you're the owner of Trolley 5 in Calgary, right?
That is correct, yes.
Yeah, so I appreciate you coming on. As I've mentioned as well, I mean, I owned a bar for a few years there. We managed to make money, but boy, it's a workout to make money doing it. And I know it's your time is precious, so getting you on for a little while to talk to us is really appreciated.
Well, thanks for having me on and thinking about our association.
Yeah, well, it's important, and I mean, I see it. It's funny. I come at things with a different perspective now that I've been in that industry. And when I go to a restaurant and I have to wait extra long to get seated and it takes a while to get there and perhaps some menu items aren't available, I have to admit, prior to owning a place, I might not have been as sympathetic. I might have got annoyed and frustrated, but now I can understand like the challenges and unprecedented things hitting these restaurants and bars. There's things beyond their control, and they're having a really tough time. So I want to get it out there to people on what's going on and why they should hopefully be patient and keep supporting our restaurants and pubs.
Well, I mean, you just led into it. I mean, we're on a massive supply chain issue right now, as all industries are. If the trucking industry loses 30% of its workforce, it's going to put our industry into a lot more stressful times here, especially than in quarter one. But on the staffing side, the shortage of staff has been real. It's been real in all senses. And now with the Omicron variant, you're seeing a lot of restaurants have to cut back their hours, or, you've got owners or general managers that are working basically 7 days a week, long hours, just to try to keep the doors open.
Yeah, and those fixed costs just don't go away. I mean, that's that painful thing. When your sales go down, when things get slow, you've still got to pay a lease. You've still got a number of items. Well, in my place, we leased a lot of kitchen equipment items and had commitments for chemical and so on that we had to pay, even if we were slow as all get out. And it's just a grind for you guys right now. Are you hoping, though, that like a lot of people are down right now just because they're sick and they're being responsible? You don't feel well, don't go to work. I mean, we that is one of the things we can certainly do to help with this. But a lot of places are anticipating that this might pass, perhaps, once people feel better.
Well, yeah, that's our hope. Restaurants have done such a great job across the province of doing their own contact tracing. So if, they've had a staff member that has come in close contact with someone that's tested positive, it's an immediate isolation. We just can't run the risk of an outbreak happening within the store, our store, or any other restaurant across the province that would cause us to have to close for a few days.
Yeah, and there's been one of the frustrating things we've watched, and we see that in Alberta, and we see it all over the place. It seems as governments feel pressured to look like they're doing something, and it's an easy target when they want to bring in a restriction. They keep saying, well, we got to hit the restaurants, we got to hit the bars, we got to hit the. I mean, there really hasn't been much evidence to show that this is where transmission has been high necessarily. And restaurants and bars, as anybody who's been going to them knows, they're doing everything possible. I mean, they're dividing seating, they're spreading people out, they're using hand sanitizer, they're using the passports and scans and apps. Is there signs that they might lay off you a little soon?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, right now, we're the only industry with any type of restriction on the 11 o'clock curfew, tables of 10, no mixing and no mingling, which caused a massive amount of cancellations across the province for corporate bookings. Obviously, New Year's was devastated this year with the no mixing and mingling. And that's been our message with the government is, where is the evidence and data that shows that, any of the COVID waves have come straight from hospitality sector. That's where it's been the toughest pill to swallow, is that you can say that socialization causes, the transmission. But when we look at any of the larger venues, they're operating the exact same way. And now they've only been hit with restrictions, which we don't want either. We don't want this to be an industry versus industry situation. It's just terrible when we really aren't given specific data as to why we're hit with restrictions or lockdown.
Yeah, I mean, you want to know that it's an evidence-based restriction. I mean, that it's actually going to do something. I mean, it's something that makes it questionable. I mean, the mixing and mingling, that's a reality. That's part of why people go out. I mean, why you don't make a meal and drink at home. I mean, some of it's nice to have it prepared for you, but it's the social aspect. And that's what keeps people there past supper and into the later hours. And it's integral to the industry. Now, theoretically, the vaccine passports should have made it safe so people could do so when it would reduce the spread. It appears that's not the case. Now, do you think there's any sign, though, that they might back off on the passport requirements if those don't seem to be making a difference to anything?
Well, we haven't heard anything of that nature coming down. You've heard the opposite, is that, the government wants more people getting boosted, whatever it takes to keep the hospitalizations down. And we've maintained on our end, we're not scientists or doctors, but we do know what extent hospitality has had to go throughout these last 3 to 4 lockdowns. We're talking about, tech that had to be purchased, from iPads to the purchasing of PPE, all of the plexiglass sanitizer, everything that restaurants have gone through has really put us into a hole. And Q1 is going to be looking even tougher if the supply chain management issues continue as well.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's such a bleak outlook, and that's why, again, I just wanted to get you on and remind people. January, February, these are tough months for our hospitality sector, and then get out there and support them. And we need them. That they're a part of our community, and part of what I want to talk about too is just that customer patience and things. The reason with the passports, I mean, you guys have already invested in the scanning abilities and to set up the work routines to check people. I mean, it's not the end of the world to do it, but it does reduce a bit of a pool of the customer base that you could have had, and puts more pressure on the business, and unfortunately can lead to some of the things that we heard so many stories about, particularly earlier, with unfortunately customers getting belligerent with front end staff and being a pain. And it's a tough job already. They don't need that.
Mm-hmm. No, and I think what's so important for the public to understand is these restrictions have come down from the government. The REP program is an Alberta government mandate. We have no choice. If we're not part of the REP program, then we are patio service only, which means that no one can open right now, in these temperatures. It's just ridiculous. The public needs to understand that these are the restaurants that have always been there for them too, whether it's donating to the local charities, hosting your local sports fundraisers or your minor hockey league fundraisers. I think that's all come back to light. And we have seen great support from the public. But for the guests that are out there that don't understand that this is not a restaurant's choice. This has been mandated by the Alberta government. The REP program is mandated by the Alberta government, or we close our doors.
Yeah, and some people just don't understand. I mean, others are saying, well, just dig your heels in like, the fella up in Bashaw and stay open in defiance. Well, you can bankrupt yourself that way. And not everybody's in a position to do that, nor do they want to. They just want to run a business. And as we know, AGLC and AHS can shut you down very quickly. And then who wins? I mean, the customers still have nowhere to go. I mean, we need the government to back off on the regulations. We just can't have these restaurants martyring themselves trying to fight it.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important point. I mean, yes, there's a number of restaurants that wanted to stay open in defiance, but at the end of the day, if your liquor license is pulled, and then the enforcements continue to happen, then you're arrested. Where do you go from there? You've lost your business and now you're charged. So, and that's the reality of it all. And I think that's what we really need the public to understand, that these mandates that have come down from the government. We have to follow them. There's no gray area there.
Yeah, and we've already lost a lot of businesses. There was a story that came on the Standard today that of the businesses that shut down at the beginning of the pandemic, 50% of them actually have never reopened since. So, I mean, these are lost parts of the community. These are people who lost their entire investment. I mean, again, the people are invested in these businesses. I mean, as I learned, the service industry is a labor of love. If you want to make money, there's a lot of better areas to go into. That's a very low return grind to get into that. So it's just tragic seeing these places getting crushed. Outside of the pandemic, though, then there's been other challenges. Maybe if we kind of go into that a bit, because City Hall regulations, things like that. I mean, I know there were things like places getting regulated to death, trying to open a patio and rebuilding walls and other ridiculous things. Presuming this pandemic comes to an end, what are some of the things we could do, though, to help facilitate, problems we had even before the pandemic, to help these businesses do better in the future?
Well, I mean, the commercial property tax just went up again. I'm sure everyone is well aware. The commercial property tax has gone back up with businesses that are still trying to fight their way out of the last 2 years of this pandemic. When we look at what the city can do better, and all of these councillors and this new mayor have all campaigned that they're going to work harder at reducing red tape. Well, we're hoping we see that. A lot of them campaigned on a 1% tax raise. We see a 4% tax raise, and there's no emotion in those numbers, except for the fact that the businesses that are still standing, that are still paying this commercial property tax, are now set back even more. One point that I wanted to bring up: 50% of those businesses that you brought up that closed, almost 70% of those businesses were open for longer than a period of 5 years. So it isn't like these flash in the pan businesses that opened up and closed. And in our industry, it is a labor of love. Our industry is tough. It's long hours, and more importantly, the profit margins are very thin, but we do it because we love it. And we love being a part of the community. And, we're only hoping that this 2022 can be a lot better.
I sure do hope so. I mean, and the whole sector has evolved into something so much better than it used to be. I mean, there were always great restaurants, but I mean, we got all these brilliant, now brew pubs, all this variety of beers. Unfortunately, I abuse my privileges. I can't consume liquors any longer, but I don't begrudge the people to get out there and enjoy them. I mean, I grew up in the AGLC days where you had your choices between 3 different types of warm flat beer, and a Long Island iced tea was as creative and exotic as a drink was going to get. And now we just have so many awesome creative places, so many new types of food, even though you got those supply chain challenges making it hard to get it on the tables. We don't want to lose all this.
Well, we don't want to lose this. And we have to remember, so many of the restaurants out there support local. We're talking about our local farmers, our local producers, everything from dairy to proteins, restaurants and hospitality, is a fabric. It's, we're the number 3 private employer in the province. And we're seeing so many restaurants get devastated through these last 2 years of the pandemic. And now with subsidies drying up, we're going to see some more casualties, I would say, too, by the end of Q1.
Yeah, that's another thing with some of the rents. I mean, and again, the landlords, we like to demonize them, but I mean, hey, they've got bills to pay too, and they can't just keep having tenants, coming in at a loss. I mean, they try to do what they can, but that we're far from being out of this hole, unfortunately. So hopefully things turn around, but I just like to keep talking to the viewers and listeners, and asking patients and asking them to get out and support it. The thing to remember, I mean, part of what inspired me, I live in Pritis, to buy that pub was that it had shut down for 6 months, and it's the only place that services that area of actually a few thousand people, and we missed it. I mean, how do you go out to see your neighbors? When do you get to socialize and do those things? Or if you want to have a drink or two, so you're not 10 miles from home, there it is. And we entrenched as part of the community. We sponsored hockey team things. There were community meetings happened in our pub, things like that. And when you lose it, you really miss it. I mean, it's one of those things you don't realize till it's gone. But when you don't have it, holy cow, that restaurant or that bar or whatnot was really a part of our community, and it's not easy to get it back.
Yeah, I got my start in Midnapore at the Seahorse Pub and Restaurant, so I'm well aware of the South community, and that's where I developed a lot of the passion for this industry, was seeing how many of the neighbors would be out after the hockey game, or the fundraisers that were held there, or the charity events, restaurants, your local pubs, they're fabrics of the community. Very rarely do you see a restaurant or a local pub say no if you need gift certificates for your fundraiser, or if you need to host a fundraiser, or to help the minor hockey league or the basketball leagues. We've always been there, and that's where it's been very positive, is that the public has remembered that, and we've still seen some pretty great support from the public in this last couple of years.
Well, great. Well, I appreciate you standing up for the industry and speaking out for it. I mean, that's one of the harder parts too. There's a lot of disparate and busy restaurant and pub owners and other people in the hospitality sector just don't have time or the ability. So having an association that can bring those issues to light and pass it on to our elected officials and remind them of how their policy impacts things is very important. So maybe a little more about you before we send you off. Where can we find more information on what you and your association are up to, and maybe a little about Trolley 5?
Yeah, I mean, you can find us on Alberta Hospitality Association, Instagram or Facebook. We also have our website as well. So anyone that wants to reach out and get more information about us, definitely contact us through any of those channels. And membership is growing, and we've got board members from across the province on our board. It's been a trying time, but it's been great to galvanize with some of these other owners across the province.
Great. Yeah, and that's another point to put for any of those restaurant and bar owners who are watching as well. I mean, hey, it's an association. You got to take part for them to help you as well. So check them out. And thank you very much for coming on to talk to me today, Ernie. I hope we can talk again soon, and maybe we'll be discussing how we've got a new restaurant and bar boom breaking out of this rut, and looking forward to better times.
Yeah, here's hoping. And thank you so much for having us on today.
Right on. Thanks, Ernie. So there we are, and yeah, it's hard to keep positive with a lot of things in these shows when you get those realistic outlooks that are coming from that sector, and that's why I really did want to speak to Ernie, because I just know how tough it was making bucks when it wasn't pandemic times. I don't think I would have had the energy to get through it. I mean, to be able to put in that extra time and have those shutdowns and the instability and insecurity. So I mean, those people who are hanging in there still, they are tough business owners, and as Ernie said too, like, these are businesses that have been there for a long time. These aren't just startups that just got rolling. I mean, these guys were established. They knew what they were doing. I mean, I've seen some insensitive, idiotic comments out there. That was more, and I didn't want to get into it with Ernie, but back on when the minimum wages were going up, which is a whole separate discussion. But people giving that, well, if you can't pay a living wage, you don't deserve to be in business. Yeah, but often the person saying that's the same one who's going to complain if their plate of nachos cost 50 cents more the next time they come in, or 25 cents more on a jug of draft. Like, you got to pay for these things. It's a tough business. It can be a fickle one, unfortunately, with some customers, and you can only raise prices so hard to put up with more expenses, and it's difficult. And I know Ernie, I didn't want to corner him on it, but as others are pointing out, they can't go because of the passports, and that's a difficult area for them, because you also get the crazed panic protesters. I mean, if it looks like you're pushing back, you can lose a bunch of your other customers on one end. It's polarized. You want to run a business. You don't want to get in the middle of an ideological battle over what's good or what's bad, or what you should be doing or what you shouldn't be doing when it comes to the pandemic. You just want to serve people food, enjoy the business, the dream that you built and got rolling. It should be the government that's saying, you know what, these passports aren't doing what we hoped they would. Let's just lay off, back off, and let businesses get on without them. We did that with the contact tracing. Remember all those stupid apps we had forced onto our phones federally and provincially? We've kind of just forgotten about those things, haven't we? They've just fallen by the wayside. Why'd they let them go? Because they didn't work. So they said, they never did it. They never said anything. They never announced it. We spent tens of millions of dollars on it, and they're gone. Well, we can phase out this passport requirement. If we can't see a measurable benefit from them, why are we bothering with it? The part where the hostess at the front of the pub or restaurant is going to get most likely to get abused by a crabby customer is when they're asking them to sign in with a passport to get into the place. Don't blame him or her who's standing there being that gatekeeper. They've got a job to do. They shouldn't be put in that spot in the first place. The next crabbiest one is at the end of the night when you're trying to explain to a drunk that they got to be cut off. But that's a separate discussion altogether too. That's apart from the hospitality industry. I don't miss it all when I was bartending. Now I'm going to go into our sponsor again here before I get on to talking about some more subjects here. Back to Bitcoin Well. These guys have been a great sponsor, and cryptocurrencies are they're almost an intimidating, complicated world sometimes, and that's part of what keeps us from going into it. And Bitcoin Well, that's why it takes repetition with these ads, but they're providing a safe means of getting it, this non-custodial form. So they're not going to hold on to the money on your behalf. It's your money, your Bitcoin. You can buy it, you control it, and they're publicly traded. That means you've had to go through a number of levels of control. You're a legitimate business. You're a good one. And they offer in-person service. Like, this is something different. Like, this isn't just some, crypto company with an office in some foreign nation or something. They've got what they call white glove service, free one-on-one consultations, like with a person in Edmonton, Calgary, Montreal, and Winnipeg. They're really focused on the West. Yeah, they're in Montreal too, but it's Canadian. They do virtual consultations for anybody anywhere in Canada, and they'll help you set up your wallet, help you understand Bitcoin. They offer seminars and things. They can help you buy Bitcoin in person and take control of your wealth. So check them out, bitcoinwell.com, all sorts of resources. They can show you how to get into the cryptocurrency world safely with your money. Now, I'm going to go on a side note, a story that broke recently. People might have heard of her. There was and I want to talk about academic tenure. It's a concept. Now, Frances Widdowson was just fired by Mount Royal University in Calgary last December. And she had been in a battle. There was actually a big story in the Western Standard about it back from last September. She spoke back against some of the woke push and identity politics in particular. And some of her views were pretty controversial, and it stirred up a lot of people, got them going. After the Western Standard article on it, some students and then some other fellow professors started a petition to have her fired. And it looks like eventually they got to. She's not commenting now because it's still live. She's still pushing back and still trying to salvage her career. But what people don't understand is what the university just did is they bypassed tenure. Now, tenure is something that came about. It's throughout the world and in a lot of developed nations and academia. I looked it up. More in the 40s is when it came in. The main thing was it's a system where a professor gets to a certain point, you get entrenched. You gain tenure. It means you're permanent at this institution. You will not be fired or discharged for going against the flow, for having different points of view. And some of this was even on academic matters. Like I guess with physics, string theory was controversial for a while, and a professor could get punted from a university for discussing those sorts of things. If they had tenure, at least they could examine it. If you break against the orthodoxy, tenure protects you. And nobody likes it when you push back against the orthodoxy of anything. That's life. That's human nature. That's the way it is. You dig your heels in. You don't like hearing about other people wanting to do something different, and you push back. So universities came up with this system, and not every professor gets tenured. I mean, this is quite a thing. They got to feel that you are of strong academic value, and it's worth giving you that honor and entrenching you into it. But the tenure did not protect Widdowson at Mount Royal University when she pushed back against identity politics, and she's been fired. And she's appealing it. We'll see what happens. But the precedent is really frightening. You shouldn't be ever kicked out of a university for a controversial point of view. University is the place of discourse. That's where you go back and forth on it, even if it's controversial, even if it makes people uncomfortable. I mean, tenure protected left-wing professors in the past, ones who talked about things like integration in universities. That if you were a professor in the American South in the 50s and 60s, an unpopular view that could get you kicked out in your butt was saying, hey, why don't we allow more than just white people in here? That was considered unpopular then. And you would have to be tenured to withstand the pushback for daring to say such a thing. And it's just because of that, the ability to push back against institutional things, whether right or wrong, is so important. Now, our universities are already dominated by the left. They're dominated by the woke. And when we start tossing people out for pushing back against that, we're going to have a terrified academia out there who are afraid to push limits, to push boundaries. I mean, we're going to be in a world of mediocrity. I mean, maybe Widdowson was wrong. Who knows? The bottom line is that you've got to discuss it. You've got to be able to go back and forth on it. You've got the right to be wrong. And now she doesn't even have the voice to make her case. That's not good. This is not healthy. This is not the way we're going to raise better students. This isn't the way we're going to get better academic papers, studies, things like that in the future. Professors now, if they have to fear for their jobs, even if they have tenure, are going to be afraid to ever poke into anything that's outside of what the establishment norm is. How do we discover anything new if we don't have somebody daring to push against the limits of the establishment? That's very strongly concerning, and we have to be worried about this. So maybe, we should reach out a bit, have people speak up, talk to universities, send letters, in support of her, even if you don't like her. See, that's the thing that the people lose in discourse. The sign of an extremist, if there's going to be any sign of extremist, it's when you try to shut down other voices rather than debate them. And stand up for her even if you don't like her. Stand up for any left-wing professor who's kept in or being fired or threatened to be fired for being too far left. There's no shortage of Marxist ones that a lot of people, I'm certain, would love to have fired, but tenure protects them, and it should. We got to fight them with debate, not with cancellation. And if even tenured university professors aren't safe from that, who is? Speaking of, I've spoken against the orthodoxy, by the way. Barbara Kay, she's a very well-established columnist. She's been around for a long time. Her son, Jonathan Kay, is very prolific in columns and news publications as well. And she's puts out occasional columns to the Western Standard. And she wrote one on the CBC, and then the CBC's been in the news a lot lately because they canceled one of their own. And her name is escaping me, but that news reporter, Tara Henley, who left the CBC and explained on what just a rotten woke culture that place has. It's no longer a good news organization. Barbara Kay wrote a great long column. It's on westernstandardonline.com about it. And of course, she goes back farther because she said it was great what Henley said and wrote about the CBC on her way out. But she should go further and realize, because Henley was just talking about her experience in the last 12 years, and she was saying it was good, 12, 13 years ago. Barbara's saying it's not. The CBC sickness runs a lot farther back than 13 years ago, unfortunately. And particularly when it comes to their reporting on Israel and, of course, the ever ongoing conflict over there, between Palestinians and Israelis and so on. If anything, if you're going to have a publication that's going to try and cover something as nuanced and complicated as the circumstances in the Middle East and Israel in particular, you want to have some degree of balance. And the CBC has just been horrific when it comes to their coverage over there. And they've been slapped for it. And they've had something like 50 times they've had to retract and correct their own pieces on that and things in Israel. So Barbara spoke out on that, and it complements, yes, Linda Slobodian's piece, which broke down and detailed a lot on what the sickness of that place is as well on the Tara Henley thing. But again, these are people breaking out of the orthodoxy, and that's why it's important. This is how we get higher thinking, get moved farther on. I'm going to get Jacob on pretty quickly here to talk to me. But before I do, I'll just again bring up our sponsor there with the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Just to remind you one more time, those guys are out there standing up for you. Speaking of things that are politically incorrect now, look at some of the lunacy. If somebody even talks about wanting to enjoy a firearm responsibly, somebody who wants to go target shooting. Wasn't there some Olympic athletes who got kicked out of some team or something because they took selfies with firearms at a safe shooting place in Las Vegas one time? That's how ridiculous it is. They've demonized firearms when they can be used perfectly responsibly and enjoyed, collected, traded, their property. The Canada Shooting Sports Association is out there promoting the safe, responsible use of firearms, and they're standing up for your right to do it. So go to their site, cssa-cila.org, or just Google Canada Shooting Sports Association and check out what they're doing for you and all the resources they got for other, people who enjoy using firearms responsibly, safely. That's all we want to do. We're sane people. And see what they can do for you. So it's a little early, but I see Jacob waiting in the lobby there. So let's not hang on much longer. We'll bring him into the show and have a conversation about universal basic income. Hi, Jacob. How you doing?
Hey there, Cory. Doing good.
Great. Yeah, so just to recap, and I gave a little bit of background before, you have been an active, community advocate in Calgary. You ran for city council in Ward 1. Sonia Sharp ended up taking that, but she's doing okay so far. I like to think you would have been better, but
yeah, I'm pleasantly surprised with how things are going in terms of Ward 1. But yeah, I have to get out there and still be a voice for people. So
well, absolutely. If nothing else, and I'm familiar with losing elections. I've lost a number of them. People who don't like me like to remind me of that all the time. There's more to running an election than just winning, even though winning is probably still the goal and the most important part. You're getting messaging out there, you're interacting with people, and I think you come out of a campaign, you learn a whole lot. You're a much better person after a campaign than before it.
I would like to think so, definitely. Yeah, you can't go through that for a year and not learn a lot. So
No. I hope you run in future ones, perhaps. Some people, one taste is enough, and others carry on until they win a seat or a spot somewhere.
I'm still around. We'll see.
Well, see. So as you've been contributing otherwise, you're very active on social media, and you've submitted a couple of columns to us. And the one I want to talk to you about was your recent one, because, something that's been talked about since the supports came in with the pandemic and people in need because they got put out of work and things like that. So there was CERB and such. Was a lot of people suddenly really talk about, well, we should have a universal basic income structure so that there's always a support that's there for everybody all the time, no matter what. And you wrote a column saying that isn't necessarily a good plan to go forward.
Well, no, I don't think it is. I have a bit of a background in this because before the conversation became a bit more universal with COVID, I am a person with cerebral palsy. I'm wheelchair bound. So I end up doing a lot of volunteer work within disability circles. And in these circles, it's widely seen that universal basic income is this boon to be granted upon all of us with disabilities. It'll raise many, many, many people out of poverty and all of that. What my colleagues in these circles seem to forget is this is going to be an $85 billion expenditure. And when you're creating that expenditure, the money has to come from somewhere. And generally, when it's coming from somewhere, one of the places it comes from is built environment improvements and things that make our everyday lives more accessible. So
yeah, and the risk, I mean, as you said, and that's what I like, is the common sense coming out of you. I mean, there's only one pool of money. We can only prioritize and utilize it as well as possible in certain areas. And if you take away the built environment for people with disabilities to get out and get to work and do things, you definitely are moving towards a model of paying people to sit at home, and that's not what you want to do at all.
well, exactly. I called it an empty calorie existence.
Yeah.
I can be lifted above the poverty line artificially. I have tons of spending power, but no purpose, nothing to spend that money on, nothing to do to contribute to the community, which is what people want to do. I don't just want a check from the government every month. I want to participate in society.
Absolutely, and not every job lends itself to remote access. You have to get down there, you have to get in, and if you don't have that access, it limits the opportunities in areas for both employers and for people with disabilities to take part in what could be a good relationship. We have a labor shortage. We should be encouraging as many people as possible to get into this workforce right now.
Oh, exactly. We're talking about employment shortages and things like that, and we're cutting out a percentage of the population and hand waving the problem by giving them a check. Here's what we end up with is a group of people sidelined who could be doing more.
Yes, and it's a bad outcome, and as you said though, I mean you differ with some of your I guess you say compatriots in the community as well, but that's fine. I mean, you can have different views of what needs to be there, and
well, it's interesting that before I came on, you were talking about breaking with the orthodoxy, because the orthodoxy here is that these social safety nets are automatically a good thing, when I've actually been turned away from job interviews and internship programs because I couldn't get in the building. So I think there's something else we can be doing here.
yes, as far as a return on an investment, and that's the way you put it. It's $85 billion, $80 billion. That's a massive amount of money. For the amount of accessibility, say even an investment of a quarter of that across the country could do for people, and even people as they get later in life, and seniors, or even women with strollers. I mean, the more we make getting around easier, the better we all are for it, and at a far lower price.
You think so, right? Making things easier to do usually makes them cheaper, as long as we design these things with some common sense and don't automatically go for flashy options that don't have a real life impact. There's so much we could be doing.
Yeah, and you'd spoken of AISH, which is a program directed to people with serious disabilities, and it's an integral one. I mean, some people just can't get to work or don't have that opportunity, and it's, I think, perfectly fair to target and support people in there. But if people want to try and be self-determining, we don't want to hinder that in any way whatsoever either.
Well, exactly. I'm a recipient of AISH. Right now, it's very difficult for me to get a job. I'd like that to be easier. And these programs are designed for people who have less ability to get into the traditional employment market. I'd like to think, and I'd like to think that I can be part of that market, so I don't necessarily think I'm the target demographic for these things. They are important, but they shouldn't be the model for everything that we do.
Oh, and I think it's in the name as well. I mean, it's an income support, but hopefully and theoretically, it's just something you're taking along the way somewhere or for a period of time, or maybe supplementing another income. But I mean, it shouldn't be an end, and that's what the fear is, I guess. You know, it shouldn't be just where you go and stop.
Exactly.
Whereas a universal basic income program that's built right into it. That's the whole thing. It's there. It's an end. I mean, not just people with disabilities. I mean, there's a much broader discussion, of course, that a lot of people who are, you know, not disabled are still going to sit around and become career video gamers because they can get that support.
Absolutely. This is what you end up when you artificially inflate people's bank accounts with programs like this. I've heard the argument that it doesn't, but you can't sit there and reasonably tell me that this doesn't de-incentivize employment, because it does.
Well, absolutely, and not everybody's immune from it. I mean, we're seeing this with people coming off CERB. When I used to work in the oil field, I remember we would hit spring breakup, it's called, where it get pretty slow for a few months every spring. Quite often I'd be sitting around the house for sometimes as long as 2 months at a time. And I start out at home, I'm going to catch up on the yard work and I'm going to do that. But the longer I sat, the lazier I tended to get and the harder it was to get off my butt. And, you know, the longer with CERB and other things, we get some people have become into a bad pattern of dependency that's not healthy for them or anybody outside of there.
Well, I was gonna say, even if you take into account the lockdowns, for say, we all had to sit at home for several months, and even those of us who wanted to get back out there going again, it's hard to restart that engine once you turn it off. So, not necessarily for all of us, but there were a large percentage of people that got used to the lifestyle that CERB provided, which I don't think is a positive one for our economy or our health, actually. So.
No, and again, I mean, the goal of it being just a temporary filler, as with if a person's capable of working, AISH should hopefully just be something that's a support that's needed temporarily. CERB, I mean, I understand the need for it. I mean, hey, if the government made it illegal for you to work, well, then they are obligated to make it possible for you to pay your bills. But let's get people back to work, and then we don't have to worry about the CERB, and the same applies to AISH.
Well, exactly. Imagine that. The more of us that are employed, the less you have to pay us out of government coffers. That sounds like a good idea to me.
Yeah, he's winning all around.
I just do want to touch real quickly on the thesis of your show about where the ICU beds are as well, because I did another column with regards to there needs to be a blueprint to get us permanently out of restrictions, but that requires the government to actually have intellectual conversations with us about the goals and the statistics that go along with the restrictions and the problems with our health system, and nobody seems to be wanting to have that conversation. They seem to be content running around without a plan, and it's just making more and more of us tune them out.
Yeah, well, and instability, it's a killer for all of us. I mean, when we don't know, as you said, we don't see, we understand the path could change, but nobody's even determined to lay out the path. How are we going to get out of this? When are we going to get out of this? Let's have a talk about getting out of this. And now we're just kind of riding it and reacting all the time when something happens rather than planning for it before it gets here.
Well, exactly. And we've been doing this for 2 years. Like you said, you'd think we would have tried some things to improve the actual sustainability of the systems we're trying to protect as well. But again, this implies that there's a level of intellectual integrity that sometimes I don't think we're seeing.
Well, when we got a complicated situation, I mean, I do think that Premier Kenney was trying, to get us back to normal. He burned, unfortunately. He said we were going to have the best summer ever. We're opening up. We're backing off. This is done. We're finished. He really invested a lot of political capital into it. And unfortunately, the pandemic surged in fall. He ended up returning to restrictions. Anti-restriction people were furious. The pro-restriction people were saying it never would have happened if he restricted in the first place. And now I think he's kind of afraid of trying to announce anything more than 2 weeks out ever again because it might blow up on him.
Well, yeah, you've painted yourself policy-wise into a corner where no matter what you do, you're wrong in someone's eyes, so it's better to do nothing, which makes everybody mad at you. So,
yeah, that's about it. So maybe, if Premier Kenney gets to that point and realizing, hey, you're getting it on either side no matter what you do, you might as well pick somewhere and just go for it, because spinning, sitting in one spot like this isn't doing anybody any favors.
Exactly. But yeah, to get back to the conversation originally, don't be afraid to push against these social program, because I did some research for the column on UBI, and 95% of the articles are all about what a great thing UBI is and how many people will be lifted out of poverty. I think that's just an excellent way of fudging the numbers, where you can report that you've declined the level of poverty in your country by such a substantial amount, but the actual quality of life hasn't changed that much.
Yeah, no, I mean, we got to look at the real outcome and what the goals are. As one of the commenters is saying there, Brad, Haugen, I think it is, or Haugen, says your guest should coach Kenney. There we go. So maybe one of the jobs available would be as an advisor to our provincial government. They can certainly use it.
If you're listening, I'm here. I'm not going to complain. But yeah, I will keep putting my opinions out there, and if people want to listen to them, that's excellent.
Yeah, no, and it's appreciated. Before we get going, though, I do want to close up with, so as you were talking about, let's say in this world where they set aside UBI and said, to heck with that, you're right, and decided to invest a large number into getting more accessibility and things, what are some of the target areas that are presenting challenges to you and other people that need rectification right now?
Well, stairs are a natural enemy of mine, and many of those like me. But one people don't think about is snow removal, usually. When we're in Calgary, pushing the snow from the middle of the road and just creating windrows that not only get me stuck and unable to travel well throughout the city, but getting untold numbers of cars trapped as well. It'd be better to invest the time not into snow and ice control, but actual removal and things like that. But if more buildings could have ramps and elevators, some of them can't. Even if you want to help, you can't right now because our historical building code doesn't allow you to renovate older buildings downtown.
So some building code improvements. I mean, that's not even necessarily an expensive thing, though. I mean, it does put things onto the building owners, but I mean, these are ways we can change things. So, I mean, appreciate that, because there's things we take for granted and forget. And even if somebody's being selfish now, well, don't forget, if you're lucky enough to live a long enough age, chances are you're going to need some help getting around later. So invest for your future.
You're going to end up here eventually, whether it's because you got gray hair or because you were born with it. Doesn't matter. You're going to end up in the same place.
There you go. Well, I really appreciate you coming on to talk to me, Jacob. Now, you've got a podcast as well, and you put out the occasional columns and such. So before you go, where can we find out more on what you're up to, your podcast and your Twitter account and such?
Yeah, so the podcast called Your Neck of the Woods. Our humble host here was actually a guest on it rather recently. So feel free to check out that episode. My handle across social media is J McGregor YYC. You're gonna find the podcast episodes there. I'm gonna amplify community voices, and I post the columns there as well. Working on a website for all of this, so it's all in one place. But I'd love to have more listeners and more people following what's going on.
Well, and I'm sure they'll grow. It takes a little while. You keep putting it out, but as long as you're putting out common sense and good ideas, those listeners and readers do build up. So I'm looking forward to your future podcasts and columns as they come in. And again, thanks for coming on to talk to us today, Jacob. I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Thank you, Cory.
All right. Have a good day. As I said before, I think, the term that comes to mind all the time with Jacob is refreshing. It's just good, solid common sense. That's why I had him on. I like people who can, reason and put out solutions to problems. I point out problems all the time. That's what I focus on. I like that. It keeps me ranting. The solutions part is always the more difficult one. And I do propose solutions, believe it or not. I write more nuanced columns at times and things like that. But Jacob has done a good, that's why I like the balance in that. It wasn't just, this is the cost of UBI, but hey, if we're going to spend it, we can have better benefits over here. Like, here's something we don't do, and here's the solution. And that's important. That's the kind of discussions we need to have. And as he said, it's breaking the orthodoxy a bit. He's talking a little differently than some other people in the community might on that issue. And as we discuss it, hopefully, theoretically, eventually, we'll get better policy. Now, another area I'm going to go into quickly here is a video, if Nico's got it really cute. I mean, we're talking about access, we're talking about downtown, we're talking about getting people to work, and our transit system in Calgary. I want to give a bit of a warning with this video. It's a mess. I mean, transit's terrible, and that's what my rant was on yesterday, was the drug use problems we have on it. The fact that they're now such a problem with homeless and addicted people in stations that they're closing them late at night, starting last night, and people are scared to ride it. Transit's at something like 30% of capacity as it is already. Yet we're building a new green line. Well, coincidentally, just this morning when I get on Twitter, and I see Tom Ross from City TV was riding the train last night in downtown Calgary at about 10:30, and he witnessed what appeared to be a stabbing and a terrible fight. We've just got a 40-second video of it because I just want to drive home. This is just random. This is what happens. This is a guy who just happened to ride it that night, pulled out his phone, because this is happening all the time. There's some swearing in this video, and there's some violence. So if you might want to tune out for 40 or 50 seconds here, but I really want just people to see this is typical. This is a problem, and this is why we cannot. People don't want to ride the train. So have a look at this.
Get the fuck out of here! I'll fucking kill you.
The next Tuscany train will arrive in 6 minutes.
Get the fuck out of here! Get the fuck out of here! Let me the fuck go! Drop it! Drop it! Drop it! Drop the knife! Drop the knife! No! Drop the knife! No! Drop it. Drop the fucking knife. Drop the fucking knife. Drop.
Now, like, there was another 2-minute video later, I won't play, but he took of police officers did show up and split these guys apart and arrested a couple of them. And I don't know what the dispute initiated with, but I mean, basically the first gentleman got stabbed. He then tackled the other fella and was trying to disarm him, and another jumped in, and they all beat each other up pretty badly. I think they're okay out of it, relatively minor injuries. And the video was turned over for evidence. But this is typical. This is what's going on. I mean, if you remember the news a little while ago, that same strip, that was on 4th Street Station downtown in Calgary on 7th at 8 o'clock at night, not really late at night. I mean, for those, I mean, I know I'm stereotyping, but those of us who go downtown all the time, you see the fellow running with his pants around his knees and the outfits. These are the addicted downtown homeless citizens. These are people that need help. I mean, I've written long articles on that. This is a big, complicated issue. It's nuanced. Just displacing these people or arresting people doesn't help. They need treatment. They need places to go. But they're going to transit. That's where they're hanging out. That's where it's warm. That's where they can get around. I had been riding transit downtown here to work, and these are pictures I took. This one with the syringe, that was at the Westbrook LRT station on the floor. And yes, I watched them do the drug deals on the trains. We have to do something about it. I mean, you're talking about wanting to revitalize downtown. We're talking about wanting to fill those office buildings. We want to get people to work back down here. Well, who's going to ride that transit? There was a large Calgary, I believe it was the Herald, a large editorial from a reporter, and people crapped all over her, because she had written late night on transit and hadn't in a long time, and then got to see firsthand just how bad it is, and it's bad. She was talking about the ghosts of figures and zombie-like people sprawled throughout the inside of the stations down south at night. And yes, that's what it's become. It's the dystopian nightmare, and we can't keep putting up with it. Just getting them out of the stations isn't a solution, and that's what I got upset about. The city's response was to close the stations because they're sleeping in there. They're using them as de facto homeless shelters, as consumption sites, and they're inappropriate for that. They're trashing the place. They're threatening people. They're scaring people. So they moved them out, but they need somewhere to move them to. And these are people very impaired. You can't just put them into another homeless shelter. It's a mess. It's just a mess. And the city's responding poorly. But the part that I also want to chip away at is, just because these people are addicted and they're in trouble and they need help, it doesn't make them any less dangerous. It doesn't make them less out of control. And that's why I wanted to show that video. These are people in a violent state of mind. And if they aren't attacking each other, yes, they very possibly could attack other citizens riding public transit. And we can't have that. That's part of why nobody's riding the bloody thing. We're building a green line for billions of dollars to this empty downtown, when our current transit's almost empty, and the downtown's full of this. This is what's going on down here. And we got an idiotic mayor, and I'm tired of her already. But she's focused on defunding the police. I mean, we saw an article recently that police morale is at its lowest ever. I mean, can you blame them? Look at the crap they got to put up with all the time. And they get crapped on either way they do it. If they get physical with somebody, it's police abuse. And if they back off and somebody gets robbed or mugged, they say the police aren't doing their job. And I mean, there really are police who abuse their role and authority. We've got to address that. But when have you ever seen any kind of service that got better by defunding it? That's how stupid the base of that defund the police movement is. Fix the police? Sure. I think there's a lot of room for improvement. Better training, more staff to help to de-escalate situations so they don't always go into a physical confrontation. More sensitivity when it comes to dealing with people in minority situations. But defunding is stupid. I mean, if we've got low educational levels and outcomes in Alberta, is everybody screaming to defund the schools? Is that what's going to make them better? Should we defund the health care to make the health care better? Of course not. But somehow these imbeciles think if we defund the police, it's going to make it better. If I'm walking downtown in that dystopian nightmare that you see right down there at night, I don't want to see police out there tackling these addicts and arresting them and handcuffing them, unless they're getting violent like they did. But I want to see a police presence around, so I know I'm not alone if one of these guys has smoked too much meth, popped a brain cell, and decided that a knife would look good between my ribs. I mean, and other Calgarians are thinking that. And I'm a medium-sized, middle-aged man, I don't have as much to fear as a smaller young lady might, or an older lady, or just a person in not the physical condition to be able to defend themselves from some of these things. And we can't pretend that some of these addicted people aren't dangerous. That's why I just had to get that video on there to remind you. It's serious, it's dangerous, and it's an embarrassment. I mean, that was one of the, I used to travel a lot. I mean, I've been fortunate. I've, the safest city I'd ever been to in my life. So here's where we can talk about some of the balance of things. I went to the Soviet Union back at the end of the 80s. I think it was 87. And going through downtown Moscow, got a little drunk as an underage kid, because if you had American dollars, you could get anything, and rode the metro, got lost. Nobody hassled us, nobody at all. But that's, of course, because they were absolutely terrified of the local authorities. Yeah, Moscow was at least overtly crime-free at the time, but that's because there was no such thing as individual rights, civil rights, and human rights, so nobody dared touch an idiot drunk foreigner wandering down the streets. But that's not a good payoff and balance between order and disorder. So no, I don't want a police state. I don't want to see an old Soviet-style Moscow. But on the same hand, I went to Guatemala City I think that was 89. And they were in the middle of a civil war at that time. And there's where you had dead people in the alleys. There's where the smell of urine was everywhere you went. There's where you went to the bank and there was literally a machine gun nest out front. And you didn't walk off of the path and outside of zones without your bodyguard, or you were going to be hurt. That's the extreme of disorder. Now, we got to find a middle. And I mean, Calgary, downtown is just reminding me of the disorder and where it's starting to get. I mean, we're certainly not to Guatemala levels yet, but it's getting ugly. It's getting bad, and we've got problems with it. Where are we going to go with it? So what do we got for the commenters here? Bad real. Link from yesterday's video clip about the vax stopping COVID in its tracks. Yes, Terry Newman pointing that out. And that's, again, I'll have to get that for on Twitter and some other areas to share that so you can find it. It is a good little clip. For those who weren't here earlier in the show, that's where it listed a whole number of politicians and news media people and so on talking at length about how vaccination is going to stop the spread of infections, but obviously it isn't. And they aren't walking back their words, so they've got to be reminded of it, and that video does it. AB Free pointing out Venezuela is a combination of both. Yeah, I think I mentioned on a show a little while back with Venezuela, there was a great meme out there, because I mean, and that's a beautiful country, much like Guatemala where I was at. Guatemala is much better now, thankfully. There's a whole show that could be done on what was going on, what I saw down there. I mean, that was the Cold War going on. So you had the Americans were funding the government with their death squads that were picking people up and disappearing them in the night. A village we'd visited after we left a little while later, I think 20 people got slaughtered at that by the local guerrillas, because those locals had been talking to the government. A horrible, horrible state of affairs down there. They've gotten better and worked their way out of it. Now, Venezuela moved hard towards socialism eventually back in those days. And they had much more resources than Guatemala. I mean, beautiful, perfect climate, coastal access, an incredible amount of oil reserves. And there's that meme that shows, here we are, our labor force is great, and then the climate's great, and the resources are great. And let's just try a little pinch of socialism, and suddenly you're in the hole. And that's how socialism, unfortunately, works as you let it spread. It's truly the virus we got to worry about. It can destroy any economy, no matter how many resources you've got, how strong it is, and you can turn into that mess. And that's what we're doing. Calgary's got a beautiful downtown. That was one of the things when I came back from traveling, I could always marvel at. I could walk in downtown Calgary at 1 a.m. You didn't sweat it. You weren't fearful. You weren't worried. I don't even like walking down by the train tracks now at 3 p.m. The stuff I used to see, in larger centers, whether it's Pittsburgh, Waco, some of the bad parts of town, or those places, I'm starting to see coming into Calgary. And we've got to head this off. And to have an idiot mayor again thinking that defunding the police is the way to do it. We were seeing that happening in other American cities that did defund the police in response to, the riots and BLM protests and things like that. And we've seen what happened. The crime rates shot through the roof. Doesn't work. We don't want a police state, but we can't defund these guys. So think harder, Jody. Think harder. because it's not working right now. Yes. So what are we on to? The condoms. Yeah, we talked about that earlier, though. That is something. And it's, every issue has a little more nuance to it. Where are we going? Dave was talking about that at the end with things. Condom sales are going down. What a weird, bizarre supply chain world we're in right now. Yeah, condom manufacturer sees limp sales. Oh, okay. That's our reporter there, Eva. It's quite the title. And but I mean, it's also a reflection of the trends we're seeing right now. Like, what's going on? Why aren't people going out and socializing? I was talking Ernie Tsu a bit earlier, right? People aren't allowed to get up and mingle at the bars. I mean, I guess that's quite often where the interactions are going to happen that would lead to theoretically somebody needing the use of a condom. And now they aren't doing that. Is it cyber get-togethers online, or what are they doing? Are people not interacting like they used to that way? Again, I don't think that's a good outcome. I don't think that's healthy for society all around. And what a weird measure for it, but it's another one of those indicators of how much we've disrupted our whole social structure. People aren't screwing anymore. Might lead to some reduced population, save some money down the road. I don't know. I need more people born to pay for my retirement later because our Canada pension plan's a Ponzi scheme. So again, maybe they're just not using the condoms. And as I said to Dave, we're going to see a baby boom. But we're into crazy, crazy times. And we got the truckers, as we said, that are suddenly not going to be delivering goods, and they're not going to be able to get across the border. We're going to see more supply chain issues. We're going to see more foods running out, clothing. I mean, you see the weirdest things running out at the grocery store. What was it? Colored marshmallows. I had to go on a crazy quest for a recipe for Jane. I need these bloody colored marshmallows. I know it sounds stupid, but it's so random, right? And just for whatever reason, for about a month, those things just couldn't be found. And now when we're suddenly taking thousands of truckers out of the mix, boy, we're going to be in some trouble here. Getting our goods and services out. So this pandemic, the longer we're in it, the more we're disrupting everything from our social to our supply chain to our communications to everything. And I'm just worried about it. That's why we got the show. We can discuss these things, though, because some of them aren't talking about it. CBC, they won't talk about this stuff. They're all doom and gloom. They're all introverted woke crap. I mean, that's, why the Western Standard, the CBC's had a biased woke problem for decades. I mean, it was one of those stories that the woman who left it said that they wanted to do a story on how there wasn't LGBTQ equivalent terms in Tagalog in the Philippines. Interesting, I guess, as a side note or something, but this, is a general interest story you put in the back of a publication on a weekend when you got nothing else to write. Very important to people who speak Tagalog in the Philippines, but they, all 5 of them in Canada in that particular circumstance who were concerned about the lack of LGBTQ terms probably wouldn't have cared if the CBTC did a story on it. And that's where the Western Standard comes in. So I'm going to give our plug for ourselves while I am at it. We aren't we're very much not like the CBC. We don't take tax dollars at all. The CBC takes $1.5 billion a year worth. A lot of paper publications take tax dollars. Trudeau made that quip, that joke about it. $600 million a year goes towards them to buy their opinions. He said it jokingly, but it really does impact it. When someone's paying your bill, it impacts your outlook. It impacts what you produce. It impacts what you do. It's just the way it goes. We're impacted by our sponsors and our readers. So our members, take out a membership. Join up if you haven't already, westernstandardonline.com/membership. $10 a month. There's a free trial, so you can get in and you can see everything that's hiding behind the paywall. I mean, our conversion rate's fantastic. For people who do the free trial, who stick with their subscription, very high. They check it out and say, yeah, this is worth $10 a month to get that exclusive content, to supply or support the Western Standard so they can keep producing the content we need, not that woke trash and garbage that they have at our state broadcaster, or even some other publications and broadcasters who take tax dollars and just put out bad content. I mean, hey, I don't care. Any group or organization can be as left as they want, as long as it's not taking tax dollars. When somebody said before that we're not biased, we're biased. We have our slant. And the news isn't. Dave is very critical about that. He's our news editor. He makes sure that news content is, we report the facts and we get them out there. But I mean, our columns and our hosts and things tend to be conservative, libertarian. That's kind of the feel of the publication. And that's the way it goes. And again, we can do that because we rely on you guys and we rely on our sponsors to keep things going. This is from Claudette. 2 pages in the Trudeau Sun Edmonton News, something from the U.S. papers. Yeah, so there's, we need variety, we need information. And we're in a great new age where these new publications like us can spring up and get rolling. And the other ones we rely on, of course, are our sponsors. So I'll finish up here with Bitcoin Well, and a reminder, these guys, they have been a fantastic sponsor for us. And they've partnered with Power ED, which is by the Athabasca University, to create a free online curriculum about Bitcoin. So, I mean, that's the thing. If you're wondering about Bitcoin, you want to learn about it, go to bitcoinwell.com/learn, and you can enroll in what they call Bitcoin Academy. You can enroll today. And from a corporate perspective, you can pay your employees in Bitcoin with the Employer Bitcoin Savings Plan. You can learn the benefits of buying and holding Bitcoin for your business. Like it's not just individuals who are going to be doing this. It's not just there. This is a broad service that Bitcoin Well provides. Everything from business needs to your personal needs. If you're looking to get into it, check them out. BitcoinWellOnline.com. This is where you can learn about it, invest in it, get involved in it, and safely. This is a good, responsible company. Now, if you haven't subscribed, as I said, get on there. Be sure to follow us on the major social media platforms and share us. That's part of it too. We can bypass the mainstream. Tweet, share our tweets, share this show from YouTube, Facebook, hit like if you haven't already subscribed. It all helps. It helps us get wider, helps get more subscribers, and helps us keep providing this content. So come back tomorrow, 11:30 a.m. My first guest is going to be Michelle Sterling of Friends of Science. And she's going to talk about a column that's just recently gone up. And then Marcel Latouche, he's a local author. You might have heard him on talk radio a lot in the past. He's been very active in speaking up. He's the president of the Institute for Public Sector Accountability. And we'll just talk about governance in general. He likes to talk about civic government, but he talks on the broader issues of good governance as well, of course, as rare as it may be, provincially and federally. So it'll be a good conversation. Thank you all for tuning in today, and I look forward to seeing you all online tomorrow, guys.